All right, so today we're going to look at a couple of tools that are going to help us as we learn to convert shapes and combine them using the Pathfinder functions. So when we use the Pathfinder functions to unite shapes, we can get some really cool effects, but there are some problems. For example, if I grab this line right here, it's a real simple, just basic path, and let's say I give it a nice thick border. Okay, so it's this nice thick line that we've created. And then I go in and I create a rectangle. And I decide that for whatever piece I'm doing, I need these to be one single shape. So they're all connected into each other. If I select them both and go to our Pathfinder tools and I select union, so try to combine them together, let's see what happens. Obviously, we have an issue. So instead of combining them into one shape, it actually connected endpoints of their lines and tried to connect those, which isn't what I wanted. The reason for that is that it's just trying to build around the lines it has. This shape here, this shape here is a single path line. In fact, if I look at it real close, when I put my mouse over it, you notice we get that single red line down the middle. That is the path that I drew that I added that border of 20 points to. And we can't combine that with a full shape because it's not filled. It's just a line. It doesn't know how to connect them to and actually union them into a single shape. So what we have to do is we have to take this and we have to convert it into an actual shape rather than just a path. And to do that, we've got a few different options. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this so that we've got an original copy. And I'm going to select this one and I'm going to come up to modify and go down to path and I'm going to convert to outline. And when I click on this, it asks for a positive value for the outline. The default is 1, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK and we'll see what happens. Right now, it doesn't look like much happened, but if we zoom in, this one on the left is my original. So I've got that single red line showing where my path is. If I come back here, well, what's happened? It's got a double line. And if we actually look at the end point, it's got this squared off end. It's converted my path into a shape of the roughly the correct size as my original line, except it's used a value of 1 for the thickness of it. So from the original central line, it's moved out 1 point in either direction and tried to create that shape. So that's not quite what I want, because if I were to come in here, remove the border down to 0, we'll fill it just so we can see it, it creates this line or this shape, okay, from this line. That's not what I want. I want to duplicate this pretty much exactly. So let's create another one. And let's think about this. We've got a border of 20 points. And when we create outlines, it bases the size or thickness off of what number we give it. So this line is 20 points total. So it's 10 points to either side of this central path. So if we come back in, go to modify, path, convert to outline again. And now instead of putting in 1, we put in 10, which is the distance from the center line to the edge on either side. We get this. Now it looks so much bigger, right? But here's why. It does not remove the original border. So it's still got a 20-point border on the outside edge. So let's remove that to 0. And we'll once again fill it. This time we'll fill it with a green so it stands out. And now if we compare this one to this one, you'll notice they look pretty much identical. In fact, I can drop this one on top and it matches. So whenever we're going to create shapes, we have to do this. So if I take this value now, set it on here and hold them together, and now I union them, look what happens. It creates a single outline shape because it was able to merge those two shapes. And we have to be able to do this when we're creating single line outlines for things. For example, for our vinyl cutouts. The other thing we have to think about is what happens with text. So if I have this filler text right here, make it a little bigger so it's a little easier to see. So we're going to jump it up to, for example, well, even bigger than that. Let's jump it up to 72. So we've got this big batch of text. We can't, again, combine this or create outlines from it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to convert this. So I've selected my text, modify, path. what can we do? We can convert to path, convert to raw path, convert to outline. Let's start with convert to outline, which is what we just did. So just like when we did a line, it asks for the positive value. Okay, if I start with 1, well, here we go. We've got this value. I'm going to go ahead and put a fill on it so it's easy to see what's actually happened. And if we zoom in, you'll notice that it's created this outline shape. So we've got an inner and an outer edge, which isn't necessarily what we wanted. So let's do this again. We're going to create another batch of text. And again, I'm going to blow it up really big so it's a little easier to see. So now let's go in, let's modify path, and let's just convert it to a path. Okay. Again, nothing really seems to happen, except when I double click, you'll notice I can't edit the text. I've just created these shapes. And if I zoom in, you can see that we've got no central lines. And to make it even easier, I'm going to take this fill and I'm going to remove the fill. So just give it a background fill. And I'm going to add a border. So here we go. Now we have the outlines of the text that can be modified. So this is the same thing that happens if I grab a rectangle and then I want to merge these shapes. I can once again union them and it will merge them properly. So this is again really important when we're designing things like vinyl cuts, because the actual vinyl cutter software can't read text. It can only look at outlines. So we have to convert all of these to outlines. The other reason we like to convert text to outlines is because when we share documents, it's not guaranteed that the person we're sending it to is going to have the same fonts installed on their computer. If they don't have the same fonts installed, they're just going to get a generic, Times New Roman or Calibri base font that's already installed. And they'll get a little message that says, hey, we cannot display the original font. We've replaced it with something else. So if you want to make sure that your designs look the way you want them to look, you have to make sure that you are converting all of your text to outlines before you share it. So that's going to be really important. Now, when we look at all of these together, we really have to think about how can we use them in the real world. And the main goal when we talk about using these in the real world is being able to look at the outline of a shape. So I'm going to, again, get rid of these and let's put a few things together. So I've got a rectangle here. I'm going to grab myself a polygon and we're going to get a triangle. Okay, just 3 basic shapes. I'm not really worried what they are. I just want to sort of see how they're interacting. So if you were to just look at this as is, it would look like, well, hey, there's one shape here, right? And it's all coming around. There's nothing separate. The problem is that when you put your mouse over it, you can tell these are separate shapes. And we want to make sure that these are one shape. So one way we can do that is if we look at our layer that we built. So we built a layer, and this is where we've been working. It's got several options. It's obviously got the lock layer where we can lock it so we can't manipulate anything. It's got the visibility, so we can just make that layer disappear. But the other one it's got is this, toggle outline. When we click toggle outline, what it does is it removes all the borders, all the fills, everything from that layer, and just shows you where the paths are. So right now you can tell these are all separate paths. And if we were to send this to a vinyl cutter or a laser cutting machine, things like that, that machine is going to read every single one of these paths, whether you want it to or not, which is why it's really important to be able to combine shapes. So to give you an example of what this looks like, if I duplicate, I'm going to take this second set and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to union those. Now, when we look at the outlines, look what's happened. We have the originals that are all separate shapes, but down here we have a single outline for the overall shape. And this value down here is what a vinyl cutter or a laser needs to be able to have in order to read and cut properly. So when you design things like a vinyl cut, you want to make sure that you have single lines that don't cross over each other unless you really want them to. But that's the basics of using the convert to paths tools and the convert to outlines, as well as being able to look at those outlines through your layers panel.